justice, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah, we're live. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair for joining us today for our latest Friday session. So for all the brothers in the back, if you're going to join us, please come closer and take a seat. So like the brother announced in the beginning, we usually have these Friday sessions periodically throughout the month. The topic for today is something that's extremely important. It's something that is on the minds of most of us here, especially those that have children, have a family, have something worth protecting. So the topic for today is protecting the Muslim family. And inshallah, we are joining for this really important discussion with Brother Abdul Muqeet. MashaAllah, Brother Abdul Muqeet is both an IT professional by profession. He's MashaAllah father of 5. He's a brother that's been homeschooling his children from birth, MashaAllah, since birth. Brother Abdul Muqeet is also an activist involved in the Muslim community, and really important for this discussion, putting both what's happening on the ground as well as what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us in our deen together. Before we proceed any further, please try to keep any side conversation outside the masajid. For those that brought their kids, alhamdulillah, they're welcome, but do your best to control the noise. So with that said, we can inshallah go ahead and proceed. So this will be a sort of like a discussion style presentation of ideas and thoughts about this particular topic. And then inshallah, we're going to open it up for questions and answers with the community itself. So with that said, Brother Muqeet, how are you doing today? Anything you want to share?
Alhamdulillah. No, please go ahead. I think you can get started.
Okay, so alhamdulillah, we had a very interesting conversation before this session, and if there's any issues in volume, please let us know. So this conversation is in a very specific context today. As Muslims living in the West, in America, in these places, we focus a lot on our children, our family, even our parents, and we are finding today more than ever before that task, that responsibility, getting tougher and tougher. Where there's a wholesale sort of erasure or deleting of the family structure of what it means to be even, blurring the lines of what it means to be a man and a woman. And this is something in particular our children are very susceptible towards, and something that's very, very aggressively being taught to them, whether they're in elementary school or high school or middle school. And I think we were talking even like from ages 0 to 3, they're having these presentations where you can't even say what they're doing in the masjid, but it's all in the light of what's going on. So to get this conversation started, I think we were kind of discussing an important question that runs through most of our minds, and maybe we can just address it before we go into the details. Is, as Muslims outside of the Muslim world, as Muslims in the West, are we essentially in a sinking ship? Are we finding that generation by generation that Islam is being sort of lost and undone? Is there any hope in our situation?
I think, when you look at Islam is not under threat. Islam is the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the one who protects us is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Yes, I do. We do get a sense of, given the onslaught of the Western ideas and thoughts. Right now we are looking around our kids, what they are being exposed to in terms of gender identities, LGBTQ, and the kind of conversations that we are being forced to have with our kids, right? At such a young age, right? Talking about physical intimacy and what it means and what those genders are. This all might make us overwhelmed and feel that, we are in a Okay. Right. Might make us feel like, we are heading into a dead end. But I think our deen has solutions for every circumstance. And our deen is liberating. And when you look at the concepts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala establishes, from the Quran, the one who guides is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the one who protects is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the one who, gives victory is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Except the condition is that we are sincere and submit ourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even though when we look at the reality, we might be overwhelmed by what is coming at us, whether you open the media, whether you look at what's going on in schools, what's going on. I mean, even children novels, right? I mean, I was at the store just a couple of days ago, and I was shocked to see the children novels about, talking about LGBTQ, and some of them, I was surprised, written by Muslim authors. So, you pick it up thinking that it's a Muslim, let's see what it's talking about. It's talking about basically having, and I'm talking about early teenager novels, right? So definitely we might feel overwhelmed, but we got to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us a way to deal with every circumstance. And inshallah, today we will unpack and discuss each one of those in details.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair for saying that. Sometimes, the situation can seem hopeless in a way. I just want to sort of reiterate that conversation that brought about this question. I was actually talking to a brother that's second, third, maybe fourth generation in the U.S., mashallah, family looking back. And he's like, as established as I am, as much as I understand the culture and everything, I'm extremely scared for the well-being of my children, my daughters, in particular, he was mentioning. So this is something very, very real. And would you say for a lot of us, it sometimes feels like you're like a fish out of water?
Mm-hmm. Which is not a bad thing to feel like, because that's what it is, right? I mean, you are living in the midst of, and that's what it is, right? A lot of times, we kind of need to unpack some of the things that are happening. And inshallah, if you give me some time, inshallah, I want to unpack that for us, is that we are, even Muslims living in the West, are not living in a vacuum. We are living in a society, and a society is organized by a system, right? And that system is based on certain ideas and beliefs. So, and I'm sure you have heard this idea about, you are free to do whatever you want to, whatever makes you happy, you can do, and and so on and so forth, right? I mean, these are the ideas that are coming from a specific aqidah, which has been made up by man, and to replace the aqidah of Islam, of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So we need to understand that that reality, that we are living under secular liberalism, which is organizing people on a certain intellectual basis. It gives it indoctrinates people through different channels, and that's why media, your schools, everything around you, your friends even at some point, right? These are all channels through which it is trying to indoctrinate you into a certain viewpoint that is, freedom, that is, following your desires and pursuing whatever makes you happy. And this is the thing that we have to understand, that this is the reality of the society around us. Once we understand that, we also understand that, our deen, Islam, has a basis, an aqidah, which is based on conviction. That is not there in a secular liberalism. The aqidah is based on compromise. It's based on benefit, right? When you go and ask them, where did you come up with this idea of freedoms? Where did you come up with the idea of, pursuing whatever makes you happy? These are full of contradictions. Our deen has a very clear aqidah that is convincing to the heart and the mind. the existence of the Creator, and that the Quran is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is something that should make us actually, more confident that we have something that is based on a sound basis. And we have a deen which defines for us how to live our life, not based on the desires and whims and desires of other human beings, but based on submission to the Creator of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, that's the point that gives us a strength and motivates us to, go forward in life. But we got to understand that, a lot of these things that we are seeing in schools and all, they are coming through because of this secular liberal viewpoint that is implemented on society.
So there's a lot to unpack over there. And inshallah, we're going to do that, bit by bit. But I want to take the question back to kind of where we started. I was a little bit surprised at your response because, in such a dire situation where men, like they're teaching this to our kids, like elementary, middle school, high school, college, and beyond. For most of us in the community, the idea is kind of like, let me put my head down, let me get through this, let me just make sure my family's okay, maybe myself. And I don't really want to rock the boat. And in effect, you see, a lot of us in the community, whether as parents, whether as part of the PTA, part of Masajid, there hasn't been a lot of talk in this. So it's interesting that you're saying that this is really it's more of an opportunity than a burden.
Yeah, I mean, this is a challenge, definitely. It's a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have to respond to this test. But, what I was going to add on was, what we are seeing, we got to understand, right? I mean, these things that we are seeing in schools and all is based on this secular liberal viewpoint. And for us, ourselves, we need to understand that Islam has an alternative, right? It has a unique way of looking at life, that we look at life based in submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not based on the whims and desires of others. And this is something we need to internalize. And what I mean by internalize is that this should be the basis on which we go about our life, right? In every aspect, right? Whether it is taking care of our family, whether it is taking care of, other obligations like commanding the good and forbidding the evil, and whether adhering to the halal and keeping away from the haram. All of those things are things we have to engage in, and that is what we should aspire for, and
not fear shaking, rocking the boat.
And yes, and that look, at the end of the day, who are we seeking protection from? Right? We are seeking protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one who protects us is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one who guides us and our children is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we got to adhere to his deen. That's all it's being asked of us. We don't control the future of our kids, right? And going back to that point, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obliged upon us. In fact, if you look at the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he made it a commanding the good and forbidding the evil as a measure of your iman, right? So, like for instance, that hadith, to summarize, it says that the one who sees a munkar should stop it with the hand, which is the default, the first response that you should be giving. If you cannot stop it with the hand, stop it with your tongue. And if you cannot, you need to know that this is wrong in your heart, right? And that's the least of the iman. So this is something that is personal for us. We have to understand that we are not commanding the good and forbidding the evil for anyone else, but for ourselves. And because we know, and this is the thing, we attribute everything to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what our Aqidah says, right? Our protection, our security, our honor. All of those things are from Allah. So we have to refer back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all our matters, and do what is required in every circumstance.
Would you say, sorry to cut you off, would you say, for example, so earlier in this year, so speaking on the topic of, enjoying the good and forbidding the evil, there was something that was a little bit surprising in the American Muslim context. I think, at least as far as I recall, it was the first time where Muslims en masse came out, in the elementary schools during the PTA meetings with the board, and they protested that there's no way we're going to have certain publications in our libraries for kids. For example, they were talking about like encouraging kids to explore like LGBTQ stuff, like download discussing apps like that helps connect them with like essentially predators and whatnot. And it was kind of interesting that Muslims kind of stood up and said something. And it was kind of interesting looking at people's reaction. Would you say that's kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, definitely what the Muslim parents did in Michigan, right? I mean, when they that's definitely praiseworthy. The point, though, we got to understand is that even though right now we are talking about LGBTQ, that's not the first time that we. I mean, this is not the only thing that is being pushed onto us, right? There are several other things that are being pushed onto us, and even LGBTQ, it's being pushed out through different channels to our kids, right? I mean, if not from the school board, look at what's being what is going on in the social media space, right? I mean, your kids are being indoctrinated into a certain viewpoint through these channels.
So let's make it very practical. So, mashallah, you're a father of 5. How old is your oldest?
My oldest is 14.
Mashallah, and your youngest?
Youngest is 5 months now.
5 months, mashallah. So you got the whole range. So a lot of parents are wondering, right? This is a very tough topic. I mean, talking about relationships in general is very tough. But now even in their schools, they're talking about LGBTQ and all these things. So can you kind of explain to us, like, how should we approach this topic with our children? Like, does it depend on age? Does it depend on, how should we go about it?
Right. So if, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the reason why we are discussing even with our kids is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put a responsibility upon us, right? He has made us guardians, that we will be held accountable for our responsibility. Our children are our responsibility, and Allah will hold us accountable for us. Now, when we look at the issue of LGBTQ, it's not as simple as us telling that it is haram, right? That will not suffice, because those kids, when they go to school, they are being indoctrinated into it. And I'm using the word very deliberately, indoctrinated into it, by giving an intellectual arguments behind it. So if you go and ask them and discuss them, they will be giving you intellectual arguments, right? So it does not suffice that we just tell them it's halal or haram. What we have to do is to, again, that's why I started off by saying that we need to first ourselves acknowledge and understand that these ideas that our kids that are being pushed onto us are emanating from an aqidah, which is an aqidah of secular liberalism.
I thought only Muslims had aqidas.
And the aqidah of Islam is believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and submission to Him.
And their aqidah is what?
Secular liberalism, which is basically saying that man can determine for himself how he needs to live. Right, and he is free to do whatever makes him happy. Essentially, I mean, you could add on to it, but this is what it is, right? So this is the basis upon which your kids are being indoctrinated, and so we have to unpack it for ourselves and for our kids. And they need to be. I mean, the only way is to give them is to challenge an intellectual argument. You have to give a stronger intellectual argument, and there is no stronger intellectual argument than that of Islam, right? That's why I said we have to establish the aqidah soundly in our kids, right? And on top of that aqidah, we have to understand and explain to them how Islam is a way of life. Aqidah is, I mean, it's not just about our character. It's not just about our morals. It's not just about our ibadah, but it's much more, it's comprehensive. It addresses every aspect of my life.
So, and subhanAllah, it's very deep and intellectual.
Right.
But let's say you're talking to your 5-year-old or your 8-year-old. How would you go about tackling this?
So that's
from your experience.
Yes. I mean, definitely when you talk about LGBTQ, as I said, we need to have this background already laid out, right? So and our kids reach a level where we can discuss halal and haram with them. So when we explain to them something is haram or something is halal, they understand what it means. And they cannot understand that without understanding the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran, and how we submit to the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this, if you allow me to, this is a very, it has to be, it's not just a one-shot thing. It has to be consistently done with your kids, because they are being indoctrinated day in and day out from so many channels, right? Every day, the moment they step out, maybe you might have, not even in the house, they are safe. The moment they pick up a device, they are being exposed to these things. So you have to constantly engage in conversations with them of where those ideas that they're interacting with is coming from. Point out the contradictions, because kufr is full of contradictions. We have to point out those contradictions so they understand what they believe in is superior. And that's the key point. That's why I said it's not about LGBTQ. It's about laying a way, the basis, foundation, and give a way of thinking. That is, of course, we are different. The kids need to understand. This is one of the problems that we have. We deal with this issue is because a lot of times we are told, and we kind of feel pressure to say that let's not talk that we are different. But we have to understand ourselves that we are different, and we should be confident about it. And we have something better to offer to the world. And this should be our goal to transfer to our kids. We should have ourselves carried, and we need to transfer it to the kids. So now when it comes to the discussion about LGBTQ, then you will have a much more effective conversation, because now you can discuss what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about it, and where is this idea about LGBT coming from. And if you want to go into the intellectual arguments for how you can discuss it, I mean, you can discuss it. Again, this goes back to also keeping tab of what are those things that are being talked to them. How are they being, marketed to these kids, right? And try to ourselves keep a tab on it, get the arguments, and then address them. And that's what I think as parents, that's what our job is. Again, it's not a one shot. It has to be done consistently. And we are doing it because we are responsible in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At the end of the day, how our kids will end up is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who controls it, but we will be held. And that's why I said we need to recalibrate our expectations, right? Sometimes, a lot of times when you think that what is your future of your kids, you feel overwhelmed, right? Yep. We don't control who they are. Once they become mature and they become responsible, they are their own persons. You can advise them, but at the end of the day, they will be making their own decisions. So what our job is as parents, start young, and this is the primary goal that we have to focus on, is to teach them who they are, and they should understand why they are Muslim above everything else.
SubhanAllah, so many amazing points to unpack there. Very briefly though, before we get down to the subject, I was actually reviewing, some of the material that you sent, right? So, as part of an activist, you're working within the Muslim community, right? And I thought this was a very interesting toolkits you got put together in terms of dealing with people and talking to your kids are in preschool, middle school, high school, and we'll probably get to that in the later segment of our session. But I want to take you back to something you mentioned, towards the beginning of your answer, and that is the sense of responsibility. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has entrusted every single person with responsibility, right? Something they'll be asked about and responsible over. And so Islam is very interesting in the sense, because you mentioned, okay, there's like a comparison going on. There's the Islamic Aqidah, and then there's the Aqidah of liberalism and secularism. And so for example, like the secularists and the people today are like, it's my choice, what I do. It's very individualistic. And they want to break down all barriers and structures, quote unquote. But Islam is all about organizing things correctly in the most perfect way, like the gears of a clock, so things work perfectly. And so even in the family structure, there's a way, like a structure, a system, nidam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fashions this together. And I'm sure all you guys see, and Brother Muqeet, you can probably commentate on this, but it seems like it's so hard to even maintain those lines and structures, of what it means to be a father and be responsible over your flock, and what it even means to be a mother and to be responsible for your kids. And it's as if, like, as a parent, you're made to feel that you can't even teach your kids what they need to know, like as if the school or the state has the more right to what is right and what is wrong, what they should be proud of and what they should not be proud of. So I don't know, can you take us from there, maybe?
Look, I think, I mean, this is, most of us recognize this, but just to make a point, Muslims are not currently in the natural state they are supposed to be in. You hinted at organization and order, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not only, and this is the perfection of our deen, that Allah has not just told us what needs to be done, but has also explained how it needs to be done, right? And subhanAllah, everything of our deen comes together, and it's a comprehensive way of life. And you cannot take piecemeal solutions and try to say that it will work, right? Family does not exist, again, in a vacuum. Family also exists under a system, right? What are the roles? What is the role of a father? What is the role of a mother? What's the role of a husband? What is the role of the wife? What is the responsibility of the children? What is the responsibility of the parents? What is the responsibilities of the extended family? These are all relations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has established. And there is a system that ensures that these are established, right? And that's why, again, I go back to, there is an issue of system in Islam, and we need to understand that. By the way, and the reason why it's important is that our kids need to understand that. Yes, today we don't have the system of Islam being implemented practically anywhere in the world today, but it needs to be part of our consciousness and discussion that this is how Islam is supposed to be. Islam cannot be implemented piecemeal. Like, okay, I'm just going to focus on my family. That is not the way Islam is supposed to be, right? So once we understand that, you understand that, okay, we are living in a system, again, as I said, going back, we are living under a system that is kufr. And we have to understand that. So basically, what we are engaging in today is a family disconnected from the entire structure that is Islam, right? So we have to understand that the reason why it's important is that we got to understand that all of us living under a system are affected by it, okay? And that's why you see, like, if you look at the problems that wider society, even Muslim families are facing the same problems
Absolutely.
that the wider society is facing, because we are affected by the society we live in. And so even maybe to a lesser extent, lesser degree, but it's there, right? The divorce rates, the whole discussions or the arguments about gender roles and all those things that's ongoing. These are all, we are being affected by that, right? And how our relationships inside the family. So we have to understand that we are in our current reality today, divorced from the system of Islam, we are in damage control mode. So there is damage happening. We are trying to minimize the damage, and each one of us is trying to do our best so we can, when we return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have an answer that I tried and I did my best. And that's the whole point to understand, is that I don't know if you have specific questions. I answered you.
I think, well, it actually made me think of something I was going to bring up later, but inshallah we can do it now. Is that the idea that you mentioned that your society really does shape how you view the world, how you make sense of things, how you understand them, and really how you make judgments on what is appropriate, not appropriate, right or wrong. In terms of family, I mean, you really made me think, like, growing up in America or in the West, when I hear family, I think mom, dad, brothers, sisters. Right. When I think of neighbor, for example, I think of the person on the right of your house and the left of your house. And especially in that context, on this idea of this nuclear family, like it's tough. Like, like being like a father or a mother. A lot of people talk about like how it's like so much pressure. Like I have to get everything right. I have to learn about everything. I have to do everything. and it's a crazy comparison to maybe how things were decades ago, maybe in the Muslim world and stuff like that. I mean, I guess the question is, like today, it's so tough thinking about everything that's going to happen to your kids. But is this how it's supposed to be?
Obviously, I mean, definitely don't want the things to be the way they are, right? But this is what it is right now. I think I understand. Going back to the point I was making, and maybe it's I did get it from this question. What do you want me to talk about?
Like is mom and dad enough? Like
right. Of course, as I said, today family has become the only fortress remaining. I mean, if you would have looked at, I mean, some of us who come from Muslim countries or Muslim lands might understand this better, that there is a general societal norms that are shaped by Islam, right? So there are certain red lines that anyone in society will not try to go beyond that. Of course, this is all changing everywhere. This trend of secularization is happening everywhere, but you still see those remnants or semblances of those norms. What I'm trying to say is that those are all things that are the remnants of a past where Islam was comprehensively implemented, and it shaped the norms of the society and establish the structures that protect our children, right? Going beyond parents. There is the community in general, which was culturing our kids into about the deen and helping our kids become into Islamic personalities, which is not there today. So now this entire thing falls on to the family unit, and the role on us as parents, and we have to acknowledge that. So we do that extra that we need to do in order to make sure our kids are equipped with the right information. Let me tell you the specific example, right? I see a lot of times, kids, and I have parents who are, they are so well versed in the Quran, right? But I'm seeing these kids, they are in high school now, who cannot even read the Quran. And their parents, one of the parents was someone who used to teach tajweed, right? But the kids they don't even know the Fatiha. And this is the reality of what we are seeing today. Is that
why is that? How could that even happen?
The priorities, right? And that's why I keep going back. Who is shaping our priorities? Even us, right? For some parents, education takes priority, or going to college takes priority over the teaching of the deen, right? And this is, again, where it's coming from is secular liberalism, because it values college education and material success. Islam does not. Islam emphasizes understanding and prioritizes building an Islamic personality, and that is the job of if we have a state, the job of the state, but it is the primary, the highest priority, that kids are shaped into an Islamic personality, which is not happening. And that's why you see this outcome, and you feel and you wonder what is going to happen with these kids who are not equipped with the necessary knowledge that they need to have about the deen, right? And so no wonder we have to deal with these issues where kids are being affected by secular liberalism, and they carry their thoughts and their ideas because they simply don't know anything else. They have been, we have let the society
dictate,
build them and shape them, instead of it being us, especially for us living in kufr societies.
A couple more questions. How are we doing on time, by the way? You okay? We're okay. So, Okay, so there was a couple of questions that a lot of people have that, before we get into that maybe deeper discussion, I would really want to hold your thought. That was a really important point about, the idea of the system, the state, and all these things. But let's take it back a step, right, and just think about this practically. One question that's on the mind of every single parent, at least that I talk to, is, okay, look, we get it. We're fighting against like the wave. We're against the current. We're in a difficult situation, and we're mitigating loss. We're trying to prevent more loss, right?
Mhm.
So, in regards to that, one question that comes up a lot to them is that, okay, how should I educate my kids? Should they be in public school, Islamic school, homeschooling? So much like your brother that has a particular a lot of experience with homeschooling, right? A lot of people that are interested in that. How do you feel that is in terms of a strategy of cultivating the Islamic personality, like you mentioned, or mitigating loss, or preventing influence from society? How does it fit into the equation?
Look, there is no one good answer to that question. Okay, I will start off with homeschooling, right? Okay, my kids are homeschooled, but I will tell you, right? School is only one channel through which they are being affected. My kids still are on social media. They're affected by it. They still hang out with friends. They're affected by them. And I see that, right, very clearly. So there is no way you can get away from it. And, and as I said, at the end of the day, we need to understand public school, even Islamic schools for that matter, they have the same issue. What are the curriculums that are being taught in the public schools or even the Islamic schools are the same, right? So, and these ideas of secular liberalism are infused in everything, right? And so we have to understand that relying on these institutions, private schools or public schools, or thinking that just by homeschooling you are able to protect your kids is not going to hold. As I said, it has to go back to prioritizing the deen and shaping them into an Islamic personality, equipping them with understanding of the deen, and helping them understand and giving them a viewpoint towards life, right? And understanding what's happening in the society around them. And I mean, that's a general thing. You cannot, but you have no choice but to explain and carry this dawah of, to command the good and forbid, understanding what secularism is and discussing it with our kids and with everyone around us. And that's the whole point about this toolkit, is that we have to, as a community, come forward, utilize the talking points that are there in this toolkit, and make it part of our conversations with our kids, with our friends, with other families. But it's important. Going back to the point, at the minimum, they need to have the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that has to be established in our kids. Again, we should do our job to help them build a relationship with the Quran. Ourselves, we need to have a relationship with the Quran. Again, it goes back to ourselves. We have to prioritize our deen. Deen is what is the basis upon which we organize our affairs. And that has to be a priority in our life. And inshallah, we fulfill our responsibility, and we then leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the outcome.
Okay, inshallah. So one or two last points, then we can open up for question and answer. One last question I did have, and I have some thoughts on this myself, but a lot of people wonder, okay, as minorities, what can we really do?
I think we got to understand the moment you say you are a minority, you are actually, and that's what it is, that language also is affected by the system you live under. That minority has a specific meaning, that you have reduced power, right?
Interesting. Okay.
Right, and you have reduced agency, and it is at the at the mercy of the majority, right? But for us, the power we get is from our deen, from the reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is what should be the motivating force behind us. And that's why I keep going back, if we establish for ourselves, and our deen has that, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and understanding it as a submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and applying, and understanding it as a way of life and living according to that way of life is what gives us strength, maintains our iman, maintains our relationship with our Creator, and that is what will give us the confidence to even challenge what is being thrown at us. And this is what we can transfer to our kids when we ourselves do that.
And not just success in the akhirah, but success in the world itself, right?
I mean, that's a very good point, right? I mean, look at, this is another thing that we can point out. Look, the kind of problems that wider society is facing. I was actually listening to there is a blog, a teacher blog on Facebook. They make she makes interesting comments. She's a teacher, right? And she made one interesting comment. You know, she's always talking about the problems that they're facing. And she said, I don't know what's going on with the kids. But I sure do know that I don't have a solution to the problem. Meaning that what I'm saying to you is that society is facing problems across all. You can talk about social crisis, economic crisis, the levels of depression, the levels of suicide, right? The level of the trust issues that people are having. Like I was looking at a study where it was saying that 1 in 3 adults in United States, no, actually, and I'm so poor with numbers, but it was a really high number, right? 63% are single adults in the age group of 18 to 29, right? And out of that, majority of them are men. So what are they? And they were trying to understand why this gap is there. And they were saying that it has to do with the kind of lives people are living, the lifestyles, whether you talk about social media, pornography, and all those things that they're being exposed to. So what I'm saying is that there is no good life that people are enjoying away from and this is actually a sign that we have in front of us, right?
Yeah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the one who does not return to the reminder of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lives a miserable life. And this is what it is.
SubhanAllah, I mean, people are depressed. We have a crisis of loneliness. We have drugs. We have all these things. It's an amazing point. And regarding your point about minorities, a sense of it's a mindset. It's not really like a physical thing. I was actually to add on to what you said, I was listening to like a podcast or a lecture recently, and this question was asked to the brother, giving that session. And he said, what do you do as a minority? He's like, well, interestingly enough, when Muslims were a minority, and he's saying this in regards to today. So today's a very infamous day in the history of the Muslims, right? March 3rd, So in 99 years ago, March 3rd, 1924 is when the Islamic system, practically the system of the Khilafah, the Islamic State, was abolished. And so you're saying, but just prior to that point, you're saying the interesting point was during the Uthmani Khilafah or the Ottoman Empire, guess what? They were minorities. The Muslims in power were minorities ruling over all these areas. And if we go even further than that, I mean, under the reign of Muhammad and Abu Bakr and Umar and Ali and so on and so forth, Muslims were the minority in every place they went, but the difference was they came from a position of power. And that's a discussion for another day. But
just to add on to that part, right? I mean, they were still accepted by the people when they implemented Islam is because of the nature of Islam. It was not about exploitation. It was not about oppression. It was about establishing the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And people actually invited the Muslims to come and take over the lands. And this is one of the things that, I mean, this dawah, the call for Islam is not just for us and Muslims. It's for the wider society. It's looking for solutions. I mean, they are being distracted, deviated into different types of movements, whether you talk about Black Lives Matter movement, now, whatever this LGBTQ things. By the way, just to talk about the LGBTQ, when they were talking about mental health issues, they were saying that the numbers are extremely high when it comes to LGBTQ teens. And they were saying, despite the increased acceptance of LGBTQ, the rates of mental issues in those teens who claim to be these categories is actually increasing. So it tells you that they are not really addressing the real issue, even what they are facing. So we have a solution, and that's where we have to understand we are different. We have something to offer to the society. We don't want to be part of the mess. We have something to offer to to take people out of the mess that they are in.
So last question, then we can open up for sure. Can you tell us very briefly about the campaign you're running and where our audience and viewers can find more information, more material?
Right. So, I mean, it's a campaign. I'm part of it, but there's a lot of, there are teams involved protecting the Muslim family. The whole point of it is to talk about some of the concerns that we as parents are having, and to give, talking points, or give, certain material that can allow us to start engaging with our children. The interesting part is that the content is organized by age group. So, for preschool, early elementary, how we should be discussing it with them, and how with high schoolers and middle school kids, and so on.
They can find it at.
Yeah. I think it should be. It's available on the website. It should have been distributed around Masajid, but I think. If you are interested, we can definitely share those soft copies too. We have a WhatsApp group where we share the content. We can definitely have them scan and join that group.
Okay. Jazakallah khair. Abdul, Muqeet, that was very insightful. So inshallah, from here, we'll open it to the question and answer session. And yes. Just kidding, go ahead.
So the question is, what is an Islamic personality, and how do we reconcile an Islamic personality being also leaders in other fields, the STEM fields that you were referring to? So let me start off with what an Islamic personality is, and then I will come to the second part of the question. Look, Islamic personality is the one that is based on a conviction that there is a creator. The Quran is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his messenger. And our purpose in life is to submit to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that we will be held accountable for it once we die. This is based on conviction, right? And so once you establish that, obviously you have a way of looking at the world, a viewpoint that is established for you to look at the world, right? And that's essentially what an Islamic person, you look at the world in terms of what the halal and the haram. You have, as a human being, you have needs, you have instincts, and Allah has shown you a way of satisfying those. Okay, and this is how you proceed in life. And you have responsibilities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has established upon you, and you fulfill those responsibilities, right? Whether it's taking care of your family, whether it's making sure Islam is taken to the world, this is also part of our responsibilities. We are engaging in that. And whether it is to excel in each field that we are part of, right? And subhanAllah, if you look at, I sometimes look at, there is actually Islam an Islamic personality, because it is the haqq, because it establishes the correct concepts, it puts you in the best position to excel in any field in life. Look at the youth around you, right? What are they? I mean, they might be very intelligent, but look at what are they being distracted into. I live in a college town, right? I mean, and you know how college towns are. What are the activities the kids are engaged in, right? Right? So imagine now, Islam gives you a purpose from day one, right? And it focuses you on that. And that motivates you and allows you to excel. And this is what it is, that, this is the mercy of Allah that He has given as a purpose, right? And that purpose is what allowed people to become who they were. We talk about the Sahaba, we talk about what they achieved, right? Not just the Sahaba. If you look at the history, who were these men, right? What kind of accomplishments they had? What was it behind that? It was Islam at the end of the day, right? And so this is definitely, there is no, actually Islam is the one that allows us to excel in any aspect of our life, because it is the haqq.
Did that answer your question? Okay. Go ahead.
Will my kids feel overwhelmed when they get to college?
Are you talking about his kids in particular?
Because
any kids?
homeschooling, I don't know. I really don't know, because I mean, again, as I said, there is no one solution to. I don't know how to answer that question, but I really don't know. But I hope that, as I said, we cannot be in isolation, right? I mean, even homeschooling does not mean that your kids are living in isolation. They have to engage with society. And that's why I go back to that point, right? We have to engage with society, right? It's just how we engage with it, right? We have to be in a position to give something to the society that we have, instead of taking something from the society in terms of ideas, right? And that's the thing that we have to focus on, and we need to be confident about. But whether they will, that remains to be seen. You can ask my son, he's over there, so what he thinks about it. So I don't know. Asim Bhai has been raising hand, so you can give him priority, or
Okay, go ahead, please.
right.
Wow.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just to summarize as a comment, it was that homeschooling is a very interesting, good thing. Anyone that can do it probably should. But the brother was sharing that in places like the UK, they're starting to do these experimental things where even if you homeschool, they're going to send to your house inspectors thought police, essentially. That's pretty crazy.
Yep.
Inspectors to come to your house, interview your children, and if they have not been taught the acceptance of LGBT and things of that sort, then it's like a red flag, and they can probably do other things. So he's saying that although it's a good alternative for some, the reality is that it's kind of like a losing battle.
Yep. Another contradiction: thought policing, right? They accuse others to be thought policing, but they're doing exactly the same, and that shows.
You have freedom for everything as long as it's whatever we tell you.
Yep, absolutely.
Subhanallah. I think there was another question. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Exactly. Listen. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. Yep. Mm-hmm. 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 Exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, I think the point that the brother is making, very important point, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. There are different ways of being overwhelmed, whether you are in public schools, private schools. Everything has its own challenges, right? What allows us to navigate those challenges is who we are, right? As Muslims, being confident in our deen and understand and having that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a lifelong thing, right? That we have to always hold fast to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be able to make the right choices, because Allah gave us the ability to make the choices. So that's, I hope I summarize it. Okay. Yes. That's true. Mm-hmm. Yes. No, Jazakallah khair. That's a very important point, right? I mean, again, that's also a choice we are making, right? In the kind of environments that we are as youth, we deal with a lot of peer pressure, and I see that a lot when because I also deal with kids at Sunday school, Saturday school. The peer pressure is there, right, to act a certain way, and they kind of borrow from each other. And subhanallah, it's, I'm sure each one of you recognizes and acknowledges that. So understand that you are affected by the company you keep, right? So you have to make sure you are evaluating that before you engage or choose your company, right? That's very important. Also to that, right? I mean, subhanallah, I keep you got to understand, when you are even with the company you keep, don't be afraid that sometimes, a lot of times I see kids again, going back to that, don't rock the boat, right? We don't want to upset our friendships, right? And sometimes we go along just so that we are part of that group. We have to get out of that, right? We need to grow. I know it is a visceral reaction or something that we want to do in the easy way out, but we have to understand that that company, if it is not, it's doing things that are wrong, then I cannot be part of it. I can only advise them and tell them, what you are doing is not right, but I for sure should not continue being with them. I have to take myself out of it. And that's for every one of us, but I think the peer pressure works a lot when you are young. So definitely to keep in mind.
Now the actual question.
Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Mm, mm. Mm, mm.
Is there a question?
Yeah.
Huh?
So the question basically is that,
Oh, okay.
yeah, how
you can repeat?
important it is, in addition to building an Islamic personality, to make how important is it to understand what is outside, foreign to Islam, and reject it? Is that what it is? Yeah, I think that goes with being an Islamic personality, right? And that's why, commanding the good and forbidding the evil is such an integral part of our deen, that you are you you have to. And that's why, when you, and as we look at that hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we talked about, that when you see a munkar, you have to stop it with the hand, and if not, with your tongue, and if not, at least know in your heart that it is wrong, and that is the least of the iman. So when I know something is wrong, I have to definitely point it out. And at the very least, goes back to the previous comment, I need to know that it is wrong in my heart. And that is the least of iman. And that is one of the, something you should be concerned about, that you are in that state. If you are just in that state where you don't want to even point out what's wrong and all. But I think it's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that goodness, when you look at the creator and nothing, so this is the thing, right, about anything that comes from the creator is goodness, and everything that comes away from the creator is falsehood. Even if it doesn't look apparent, we need to understand what it is. And a lot of times, I was reading a ayah in Surah Anam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was talking about how the shaitan and his followers deceive people with elegant words, right? They spin narratives to make things look pleasing to you, right? And this is the reality, that things are made to look pleasing to you, and that's what we have to go back to, and understand that in the light of the Quran, the reality of that issue that we are looking at. That's why I always refer back to the Quran and the Sunnah, right? And at the end of the day, that's why part of the Islamic personality is that once you establish the Quran is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know that you have to submit to what Allah has commanded you to. You use your mind to understand the ruling of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not trying to, compare, reason why a certain thing that is coming from outside Islam and trying to compare with what Islam has. I don't know if I answered that question. If you have anything else to add to that, go ahead.
Okay.
La ilaha illallah. That's right. Deen. Islam. Right.
So just to summarize, like, okay, Jazakallah khair for the comment. I think we understand it now. So basically, in order to build that Islamic personality, it's not, the one part is building the Islamic ideas, concepts, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants and what Islam calls for. But also within that is rejection of anything that is outside of Islam, outside of the Islamic Aqidah, outside of the Islamic framework of thinking and whatnot. And so you need both pieces in order to create that Islamic personality. Did we understand that correctly? Jazakallah khair. So I think we may have time for one or two more questions if anyone has it. And for the sisters, if you have questions, you're welcome to share as well. But go ahead.
That's yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. 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 Yep. Yep. Right. 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 Yeah, I think sometimes that word is ambiguously used to represent, which is numerical, looking at numbers, right? But you are right about that minority. Actually, is in the context of secular liberalism and kufr, basically. But in Islam, it is about the authority of Islam, and once it's established, it is about taking care of the affairs of the people. Very true. And that's another reason why you see, even though we were numerically few in number relative to the population that the Islam governed over, it was accepted by the people because of when they saw the justice of Islam, even for dhimmis. And that's what I think it was in the context of, how Islam solves the problem for mankind, not just for Muslims, but for mankind. And that's where that point is. But Jazakallah khair for that flag.
Jazakallah khair. Any other questions, comments, concerns? So, okay, inshallah, we can wrap it up there. Jazakallah khair for, again, Brother Muqeet, and then for the audience, insightful comments and engagement. So inshallah, the next session will be after Ramadan, inshallah. So stay tuned.